Okay, so we've talked in this class so far about how the labor supply curves work and why, they're upward sloping. If we have a wage and a quantity of labor, right, the labor supply curve will slope upwards, right? But when it comes to individual firms hiring people, the labor supply curve takes on more of a perfectly horizontal shape. So for this could be, the labor market, like the general overall market for labor is upward sloping. But each individual labor market, so let's say, the labor market for car salesmen, or let's do factory workers. Let's do factory workers. That'll be easier. Right? So we still have our same axes. The labor market for factory workers, it seems, is more like this, with a individual firm supply curve that's perfectly horizontal, right? And what this says is that factories, or in this case factories, can find as much work as they want at, say, $15 per hour. There's always more workers available, right? They can hire as many workers as they want at $15 per hour, okay? And the idea here is that with this, 15 as the wage rate, what it means is that workers have options. They have other options for employment. There's other places they can go. So the factory worker, maybe they can go work as, I don't know, they can go instead work at Walmart, let's say. I'll just use a generic example, a generic substitute, right? They can go work at Walmart and they can make $15 an hour there, right? And so if the factory doesn't pay them at least $15, well, these people are going to say, screw it, I'm out, right? And if they were to pay them $15.01, right, then they'd just be adding costs without getting any extra benefit out of it, okay? And so in this type of scenario where there's competition for the workers, right? There's competition for individual workers. We say that individual firms or businesses are what we call wage takers. Okay? So they don't have any real say in what this wage is. They instead must take it. They must simply accept that the cost of hiring another worker is $15 per hour, right? There's no leeway there. That's what it is, okay? But what about situations, right? And so in this scenario, what we're saying is it's completely costless for an employee to switch to a different company, right? So switching from working at, let's say, Ford and going to work at, let's say, GM, right? Costless, or extremely low cost, right, in the real world. But we could say, like, look, if Ford isn't going to give me $15 an hour or whatever it is, General Motors will. And so if you're not going to pay me $15 an hour, I'm going to take my talents to GM, right? And so there, Ford would have the option of $15 or nothing, or no work, right? And so here we're saying it's costless for workers to find new work, or to find a new job, right? It happens instantaneous, right? And if that's true, the labor supply curve for the individual firm will be perfectly horizontal, okay? But what about situations where it's costly to adjust your behavior as a worker, right? What if, for example, it's difficult for an employee to find a new job, right? So if it's difficult for employees to find new jobs, then it seems like the employer would be able to extract some sort of bargaining power over the worker and pay them just enough to keep them from leaving and searching for a new job, right? So we all know that it's somewhat annoying to have to find a job. You have to sit on Monster.com or BigRapidHelpWanted.com or whatever, right? And you have to wade through the applications, right? And if you currently have a job, you might say, yeah, I could probably find a better one, but I'm not really willing to go and spend 2 hours of my Saturday night looking on Monster.com. That's too much for me. And so even if you could find a better job. You might not do it because the search costs were too high. And if that's true, then your current employer might actually be slightly underpaying you, but they're paying you just enough to stick around. Okay? Or what about like the opposite situation, where let's say you as an employee have developed, special skills and knowledge that are particularly beneficial for the individual firm that you work for, right? In this case, it seems like the tables may have turned, and that now you as the employee have the bargaining power, right? So you get to say to your employer, look, I am valuable to you because I know how this place works. I know who's where. I know who to talk to get things done. I know how all the machines work, all the special programs that you guys use. I know how all those things work. And if I leave, then you're going to have to train someone. So you'd better give me a raise or else I'm walking. And so in that world, it seems like the employee who has the special skills and knowledge, right, would be able to say, you have to overpay me, right? And so this week's talk, or this week's topic, is looking at these sort of issues. And so rather than assume that everyone everywhere can find a new job or employee costlessly, as we've done so far, we're going to assume that changing jobs is annoying, or in other words, in real economist speaks, it's costly, and that firms would rather keep the workers that they have than find and train new people, right? So at some level, these assumptions aren't that unrealistic. All I'm saying is that a business would rather retain employees than have to retrain them, and I'm saying that you as a worker would rather stay where you are than have to constantly find new work. Okay, and so these assumptions are fundamentally fairly simple and shouldn't be too contentious. So what the question we need to ask is, what do these assumptions do, if anything, to the model that we've been working with so far?